Berlin, 1961, a city carved in two, not just by bricks and mortar, but by ideologies so fiercely opposed they threatened to tear the world apart. In the heart of this fractured city, a wall rose overnight, a wall that would become a symbol of division, a scar on the soul of humanity. But what if I told you this wall, the Berlin Wall, was not just a barrier, but one of history's greatest blunders, a mistake born of fear, haste, and miscalculation, with consequences that would echo for decades. Welcome to The Past Unfolded. Today, we unravel the story of how the Berlin Wall came to be and why it was doomed from the start. To understand the Berlin Wall, we must first step back to the ashes of 1945, when the Second World War ended and Germany lay defeated, divided by the victors. The Allies, America, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union carved up the nation like a shattered chessboard. The Western half, nurtured by democratic ideals and economic aid, began to rebuild. The eastern half, under Soviet control, became the German Democratic Republic, or GDR, a state bound to Moscow's iron will. But Berlin itself, Berlin was a problem. The city sat deep inside East Germany, yet it too was split. West Berlin, an island of freedom surrounded by the communist East, became a beacon, a place where dreams of prosperity flickered in the shadow of oppression. By the 1950s, the differences were stark. West Berlin gleamed with new shops, jazz clubs, and the hum of opportunity. East Berlin, it was a grayscale world of rationing, surveillance, and fear. And here's where the seeds of the blunder were sown. East Germany was bleeding, losing its people, its brightest minds, its future. Between 1949 and 1961, nearly 3 million East Germans fled to the West, many through Berlin, where crossing the border was as simple as stepping onto a train. Doctors, engineers, teachers, they vanished into West Berlin's open arms, leaving the GDR hollowed out. The Soviet Union and its East German puppet, Walter Ulbricht, watched this exodus with growing panic. Something had to be done. Imagine it. You're a young engineer in East Berlin. You've heard stories of life in the West, freedom, opportunity, a future where your children won't live under the shadow of the state. Every day you walk past the border, knowing one choice could change everything. But that choice came with a cost. Families were torn apart, friends disappeared in the night, and the East German government, they saw this not as a failure of their system, but as a betrayal. By 1961, the situation was desperate. The GDR's economy was crumbling. Its workforce was vanishing. Walter Ulbricht, under pressure from Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev, demanded a solution. The West, they claimed, was luring their citizens with propaganda and promises. But the truth was simpler and more damning. People weren't leaving because of lies. They were leaving because they could see the difference just across the street. And so, in the summer of 1961, a plan was hatched in secret, one so drastic, so divisive, it would change the course of history. The East German leadership called it Antifaschistischer Schutzwall, the anti-fascist protection wall, a noble name for a desperate act, but to the world, it would simply be the Berlin Wall. And its creation? That's where the blunder began. August 13, 1961. Berlin sleeps, unaware that history is about to shift in the dead of night. Under the cover of darkness, East German soldiers, armed with orders and barbed wire, fan out across the city. Their mission? To seal the border between East and West Berlin forever. This is The Past Unfolded, and today we step into the moment the Berlin Wall was born. A moment steeped in secrecy, desperation, and the first cracks of a historic blunder. It began with a whisper, a plan so clandestine even most East German officials were kept in the dark. Walter Ulbricht, the GDR's leader, and his Soviet backers knew the stakes. The exodus of their people, nearly 20,000 a month by mid-1961, was bleeding East Germany dry. The solution? A barrier, not just any barrier, but one that would choke off the flow of hope itself. They called it Operation Rose, and it was executed with chilling precision. Imagine being one of those soldiers. You're told you're protecting your country from Western spies and saboteurs. But as you unroll the wire, you see familiar streets, places where you played as a child, where neighbors laughed together, sliced in two. By dawn, 43 kilometers of barbed wire crisscrossed Berlin, splitting families, friends, and futures. It wasn't yet wall, but it was a wound. The world woke to chaos. West Berliners stood stunned, watching as streets they'd walked yesterday became forbidden zones. In the east, panic rippled. People rushed to the border, hoping to cross before it was too late. Some made it, leaping over wire, dodging guards. Others didn't. The stories are heartbreaking. A mother separated from her children, a fiancé stranded on the wrong side, a life's work left behind in a single night. Why, indeed, the East German government claimed this was defense, a shield against Western aggression, but the truth was laid bare for all to see. The wire didn't face outward to keep enemies at bay. It faced inward to trap their own people. The world saw it for what it was, a prison, not a fortress. And that was the first misstep of the blunder, building a barrier that exposed the GDR's weakness rather than its strength. Yet the barbed wire was only the beginning. The East German leadership knew it wasn't enough. People were still escaping, crawling under the wire, slipping through gaps, outsmarting guards. Within days, plans were drawn for something permanent, something unyielding. Concrete guard towers, death strips. The Berlin Wall, as we know it, was taking shape, but with every brick, the blunder deepened. August 1961. The barbed wire that sliced Berlin in two was just the beginning. A hasty scar across a wounded city. But within days, East Germany's leaders doubled down, replacing wire with something far more sinister. Concrete, watchtowers, and a resolve to make escape impossible. This is the past unfolded, and today we trace the Berlin Wall's transformation into a fortress of fear, and how its very design deepened the blunder that would haunt history. The Berlin Wall didn't rise as a single act. It evolved, like a nightmare taking form. By late 1961, the makeshift barriers of Operation Rose were replaced with precision-engineered slabs, some 12 feet high, stretching 155 kilometers around West Berlin. This wasn't just a wall, it was a system. Guard towers every few hundred meters, searchlights sweeping the night, a death strip, a barren no-man's land rigged with tripwires and landmines. East Germany called it protection, the world called it a cage. Picture it, you're trapped in East Berlin. The wall looms outside your window, a daily reminder that freedom is just beyond reach. You hear stories, whispers of those who tried to cross. Some scaled the wall in the early days when it was still low, others tunneled beneath or hid in carts. But as the wall grew, so did the risks. Guards were ordered to shoot on sight, and yet people kept trying. Why? Because hope is stubborn, even in the face of death. Between 1961 and 1962, at least 12 people died trying to cross. The true number? Likely higher. Each loss was a crack in the wall's myth of strength. East Germany claimed it stopped traitors, but every bullet fired at a fleeing citizen told a different story. One of a regime so fragile, it had to imprison its own people to survive. This was the blunder's second misstep. A wall meant to project power instead revealed desperation. The West watched in horror. Leaders like President Kennedy grappled with a dilemma: push back too hard and risk war with the Soviets, do nothing, and abandon Berlin's soul. In 1963, Kennedy stood before the wall and declared, "Ich bin ein Berliner," I am a Berliner. His words weren't just solidarity, they were a condemnation broadcast to the world. The wall, meant to silence dissent, was becoming a global stage for East Germany's failure. But the wall wasn't done growing. By the mid-1960s, it would become even deadlier. More layers, more guards, more ways to crush hope. And with every upgrade, the blunder burrowed deeper, tying East Germany's fate to a structure that could never truly hold. The Berlin Wall stood as a monument to control, cold, unyielding, a line drawn in blood and concrete, but beneath its shadow, something unstoppable stirred, the human spirit. This is the past unfolded, and today, we dive into the stories of those who defied the wall, ordinary people who risked everything for freedom, and whose courage exposed the blunder at the heart of East Germany's fortress. By the mid-1960s, the wall was a killing machine. Reinforced concrete, anti-climb pipes, and sharpshooters and towers made crossing a death wish. Over 5,000 East Germans tried anyway. Why? Because the wall didn't just divide a city, it divided souls. Families longed longed to reunite. Dreamers yearned for a life beyond surveillance. Each escape attempt was a rebellion, a crack in the myth that the wall could contain hope. Take the story of Tunnel 57. In 1964, a group of West Berlin students, barely out of their teens, learned that friends and strangers were trapped in the East. They decided to act. For months, they dug a tunnel 150 meters long under the wall's death strip. By hand, in secret, they clawed through dirt and dread. When it was done, 57 East Germans crawled to freedom in a single night. 57 lives reclaimed, but not without cost. One guard, tipped off, nearly stopped them. The tunnel was sealed, but its story echoed. Other escapes were just as bold. Some leapt from windows bordering the wall, landing in nets held by West Berliners. Others hid in car compartments, folded into spaces barely big enough to breathe. One man, Wolfgang Engels, stole a tank and crashed it into the wall, only to be shot and left bleeding, yet he survived. Each story was a dagger to the East German regime, proving the wall's strength was an illusion. But defiance came at a price. At least 140 people died at the wall, shot, drowned, or crushed by its machinery. Ida Siekman, the first known victim, jumped from her apartment window in 1961, hoping to reach the West. She fell to her death. Peter Fechter, only 18, was shot in 1962 and left to bleed out in the death strip as Western cameras watched, helpless. Their names became rallying cries, proof that the wall's true purpose wasn't protection, it was punishment. Here lies the blunder's third misstep. The wall didn't stop the escapes, it amplified them. Every tunnel, every leap, every life lost was a story the world couldn't ignore. Western media broadcasted the horrors. East Germany's leaders scrambled to justify the unjustifiable, but their lies unraveled. The wall, built to save their state, was instead turning it into a pariah. For nearly 3 decades, the Berlin Wall stood as more than a barrier. It was a fault line, splitting not just a city, but the world. It became the Cold War's most enduring symbol, a concrete embodiment of fear and mistrust. By the 1970s, the wall was no longer just Berlin's wound. It was a global stage. On one side, the West championed freedom, prosperity, and democracy. On the other, the Soviet bloc preached equality under state control. But the wall told a different truth. It wasn't just keeping East Germans in, it was keeping the world out. A stark admission that communism feared comparison. And that fear, it shaped everything. The wall drew a line through humanity's soul. In the West, it became a canvas, covered in graffiti, prayers, and protests. Musicians like David Bowie performed at its edge, their notes drifting over to East Berliners listening in secret. In the East, the wall was a taboo. No graffiti, no dissent, only silence enforced by the Stasi, East Germany's secret police. Yet even they couldn't stop the whispers of change. The world's eyes never left Berlin. Every escape, every death, every speech fueled the Cold War's fire. When President Reagan stood at the Brandenburg Gate in 1987 and demanded, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," his words weren't just for Moscow, they were for millions watching, proof that the wall's shadow stretched far beyond Germany. It was a propaganda disaster for the East, a rallying cry for the West, but the blunder ran deeper than image. The wall was a drain on East Germany's economy, its morale, its future. Maintaining it cost billions, money that could have fed families or rebuilt cities. Guards, surveillance, repairs. It was a machine that consumed the state it was meant to save. And the people, they grew restless. By the 1980s, dissent simmered in East Germany's churches, streets, and hearts, fueled by glimpses of a freer world just beyond the concrete. The wall had been built to stop a hemorrhage, but it created a new one. It didn't just trap bodies, it trapped dreams, ideas, and trust. East Germans saw the West thriving, heard smuggled broadcasts, and asked why their lives were different. The Soviet Union, stretched thin by its own wars and failures, couldn't prop up the lie forever. The wall, meant to strengthen the East, was instead choking it. November 9th, 1989. A date etched in history's heart. After 28 years of division, fear, and loss, the Berlin Wall, the Cold War's grimmest monument, began to crumble, not by bombs or battles, but by the unstoppable will of people who refused to be caged. This is the past unfolded, and today we witness the fall of the wall and the final unraveling of one of history's greatest blunders. The end began quietly, in the cracks of a failing system. By 1989, East Germany was fraying. the economy staggered under the wall's cost. Billions spent on guards, concrete, and lies. The Soviet Union, weakened by Afghanistan and internal rot, could no longer prop up its satellite states. And the people? They were done waiting. In churches and town squares, they gathered chanting, "Wir sind das Volk." We are the people. Their courage lit a fire the wall couldn't contain. Then came the mistake that broke the blunder open. On November 9th, an East German official, Günter Schabowski, misread a vague memo during a live press conference. Asked when new travel rules would start, he blurted, "As far as I know, immediately." The words hit like a spark in dry grass. Within hours, thousands surged to the wall's checkpoints, demanding to cross. Guards, untrained for this, hesitated, then opened the gates. It was chaos, but the beautiful kind. Families reunited after decades. Friends embraced across a line that no longer held. The wall, built to divide, became a bridge. Berliners danced on its crest, tearing it down piece by piece. The world watched, breathless, as the blunder collapsed under its own weight. A structure meant to save a regime instead buried it. The fall wasn't the end, but a beginning. Germany reunified in 1990, a painstaking process of healing scars deeper than concrete. The wall's legacy lingers, in memories, in memorials, in the lessons it left behind. It was a blunder because it misunderstood humanity. No wall could hold back truth or hope or the hunger for freedom. Its fall proved that. Today, we walk where the wall once stood, reminded that history's darkest moments can give way to light. The Berlin Wall was a mistake, a desperate act that exposed a regime's fragility and united a world against it. Its story is ours, a testament to resilience and a warning. Division built on fear will always fall. This is the past unfolded. If this journey moved you, like, subscribe, and ring the bell to explore more of history's mysteries with us. Until next time, keep seeking the truths that shape our world.